Hello everybody, welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martijn Lofvers. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement. I'm also the Trendwatcher of Supply Chain Media. And I'm also the architect of the SCM IT Superweb Europe. And I will explain later the reason why I mentioned this. So in the next 60 minutes, we have a live webinar and we'll talk about supply chain management reinvented. And we talk about AI, we talk about agents. So a lot of cool stuff happening, mind-boggling stuff to some extent. And it will change the supply chain. I'm convinced about that. And to have this conversation, I have an expert with me. That's Gabriel Werner. He's a Field Chief Technology Officer of Blue Yonder. And he's been working in the supply chain and business software for almost his whole working life. And he's at Blue Yonder since 2011. Gabriel, welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
So we have a nice, interesting slide deck coming up to have a cool conversation. So to explain the practicalities of this webinar, it will be live, and but it all will be recorded. We will put it also on YouTube for watching afterwards, and the PDF will be downloadable in 48 hours. So the audience is on mute, and we have a large audience, hundreds of people listening in. So you can listen, of course, and you can chat. So on the right-hand side, you see the chat functionality. Please use that. But if you have real questions, good questions to Gabriel and me, please use the Q&A functionality on the right-hand side. So I will track this functionality, so I don't bother the chat function as such. So if you have questions to Gabriel or me, and they are in line of the conversation we'll be having, I will ask these questions immediately. If not, there will be a Q&A at the end of this webinar. All right. Next to this hour, after 5 o'clock CET, we have an extra 30 minutes. So Gabriel and I will be sitting down in the virtual lounge. So you can have a conversation afterwards with Gabriel and me live. And basically, it's like a Zoom meeting popping up. And then you can have a conversation with us if you have more questions or any comments you want to discuss with the both of us. And don't be shy, so we don't bite. So that could be nice afterwards. All right, as of this point, I will put off my camera. So the reason why is, and Gabriel can also put off his camera, because we can enlarge the screen so you have a better view on the presentations. All right. So we talk about supply chain management reinvented. Why is that needed? Well, as you can see, we have several black swans occurred in the last 3 years, 4 years actually. So you see COVID happened in 2020, leading to lockdown, shortages, all kind of bullwhips, but also, higher fuel prices. Inflation was already happening around that time. E-commerce was booming, etc. So a major thing is the bullwhips. So, downstream and upstream, all kind of fluctuations. The war in Ukraine started in 2022. Gas supply was an issue, also raising costs, inflation, bullwhips, and possibly leading to recession. And Gaza happened, 1.5 years ago, leading to blockage of the Red Sea, cost raises, etc. And also CSRD. And that sounds funny, for some company, it's not a surprise because they are publicly traded and they know what will happen. But for some companies, I think 55,000 companies in Europe are inflicted by CSRD, will be impacted, and maybe it will postpone, but in the end, I think it will happen. Gabriel, when you look at this, what kind of conversation are you having with your customers when you look at all this ripple effects?
I would say the conversations really are sort of revolving around the notion, hey, if all this is going on, all this is happening out there, how can I make sure that my supply chain remains running? As simple as that. How can I make sure it keeps a high degree of resiliency, so that I can switch quickly if I need to, from a route perspective that the material flow might take, and also from a system landscape perspective, like how can I make sure that the landscape I have doesn't create problems for me if and when all these things have effects on my supply chain in particular. So it's a discussion around resiliency and around agility.
Yeah. So I'm having a lot of conversation with supply chain officers, chief supply chain officers of larger companies, also mid-sized companies. And the good news is since 2020, supply chain has a seat in the boardroom. They will be listened to.
Yeah.
So that's a good news. Maybe now things start a bit fading away. It seems to be that disruptions is the new normal, and maybe the urgency is less. But then again, the disruptions won't go away. So that's what I hear.
Yeah, I agree with that. So the
Yeah,
disruptions aren't going away, and I from what I can see from the conversations we're having, the sense of urgency is as high as it was in 2020.
yeah. So getting back, you mentioned already applications, how to switch, etc. So as I mentioned, I'm the architect of the SCM IT Super Map Europe. So basically, there's an overview of all kind of available proven applications in Europe. So you have ERP, WMS, TMS, and you name it. You see it on the top of the slide, and you see all kind of vendors, the major vendors, but also the niche players. So basically, this gives an overview of who has delivered what in Europe. Not so much what they are selling, but what's actually implemented. That's based on that. And of course, Blue Yonder is also in there. And as you can see, and you see when you look closely, Blue Yonder was previously known as JDA. And for some of you, on the WMS space, Red Prairie is a household name. i2 Technology is also in there long time ago. There's a lot of heritage in there. Flexis has been acquired quite recently, and also One Network, and we'll talk about this later. So basically, there's a lot of experience, and also a lot of customers using from all kind of areas. So Blue Yonder is one of the bigger players in the supply chain field. Gabriel, what's your comment on this?
So what I think your subway map shows very clearly and beautifully is the notion that the software vendor landscape in the supply chain management domain is still very, very fragmented, highly fragmented, I would say.
Yep.
So, and that has an impact on organizations. It forces them to work with many, many vendors to get the capabilities that they require, which of course implies that in order to then make business processes work across those functional domains, any enablement of any of that is fully on the customer's IT organization to get it working. And reality is, of course, most companies can be happy if and when they manage to get some integration going, at least for some basic data sharing across such a fragmented landscape. Let alone more business process driven support that really is more workflow driven, and that is more on the enablement of the sometimes mission critical processes that will span across the domains that these different vendors all address.
Yeah, and we'll talk about later in the whole webinar about the different levels of maturity, how to get into the future in a smooth way. Well, there's a lot of talking about AI, and maybe it's good to have a clear definition what we see as AI and what not. So basically, I've created this slide, and it's also been approved by Professor Carlos Cordon of IMD Business School. So basically, you have AI, that's the bigger bubble. And zooming in, you have machine learning, deep learning, and zooming in, you get to this ChatGPT and Copilot, what has been talking about a lot in the last 1.5 year. So, but the main thing I want to address here in supply chain, when you have some sort of advanced planning and scheduling software with optimization and neural networks, etc., you're already using AI for maybe 10 years already. So for some supply chain people, it's not new, but that's good to see. Okay, it's not only ChatGPT what we are talking about.
Yeah, I like this slide. It's a good depiction of what sort of falls under the guise of AI, and obviously AI as such is not a protected term. So from the marketing departments of this world are free to call AI whatever they want. So it's good that you put up a bit of a definition here. And I also like the call out on the APS side of things. And it kind of shows the nature of supply chain problems is a data problem in the first place. So even if we really go back in time and look at the first attempts to drive operations research and linear programming and that kind of stuff into supply chain problem solving, what you always encounter is sort of the combinatorial explosion. The complexity of the problem isn't obvious to sort of non-supply chain experts. Everyone in supply chain immediately understands this, but this is what 2020 also has shown, when suddenly supply chain became a household topic for the primetime news. People wondered, how about the supply chain? Isn't that just about you just ship stuff from A to B, and you need a bit of a demand forecast, and it's not that complicated, is it? But it is, by the nature of the numerical problem that sits underneath, which is the combinatorial explosion of the data. So that is even faster growth compared to say something exponential. Exponential looks mild against the combinatorial explosion.
Getting back, about definition, what do you think is statistical forecasting? Do you call that AI or not?
So we don't in Blue Yonder. We have sort of consciously made that choice. I mean, we had for a long time capabilities that were to some extent self-learning. So for example, they would analyze the sales history, and would understand what type of history that is, and therefore make recommendations around what procedure to use and how to parameterize such a procedure automatically. So in a very, very wide definition, someone would be tempted to maybe subsume this under the term of AI, but we consciously decided, no, you know what, let's stick with what the vast majority of people considers AI, and therefore let's not include it.
Okay, that's fine with me. So let's stick to the maturity levels, because the whole story is about changing the whole supply chain management approach. So first, let's talk about level 0. What's in there?
Yeah, so with level 0, we're just trying to depict sort of the status quo, right? So, and it's again also nicely depicted by your subway map. So if we look at system landscapes in manufacturing and retail companies and LSPs, which is the 3 industries that we serve, then what we find is there is a lot of different we refer to that as point solutions that are in place. So you may have one vendor that has is your provider for a planning solution. You have another one for your warehouse, a third one for transportation, another one for visibility, another one for yard, and so on and so on. And so what we find there, and it's by the nature of what it is, this is not sort of blaming anyone or blaming or pointing any fingers. It's just where we are. That there's a lot of then project build integration, so point-to-point integrations that make sure that data is exchanged. Oftentimes these integrations are scheduled, so batch-based, and that can lead to certain effects around latency when it comes to making sure that information flow progresses through the system landscape. So that we depict here as sort of the level 0 of orchestration maturity, and we just need to maybe explain real quick the notion of why orchestration. So we think the way we think about supply chain is you have this notion of planning and execution sort of coming together.
Yep.
And sometimes short-term execution decisions have long-term impacts, and the same way, if you don't do the right decisions long-term, you have further down the road problems if you haven't set yourself up appropriately. So in order to make sure that decisions are being made across those domains, that's what you need orchestration for, to make sure that all stakeholders that are part of the process are included in the process.
Okay, so we are talking about paradigm shift in supply chain management thinking, reinvented, etc. Maybe we can explain why this is needed and why companies should look at it.
Yeah, so we have all these uncertainties, right? So your Ripple slide has also explained those, I think, very clearly. So on the left side of this picture, you can all see, right? So there's a lot of pressure that could be subsumed under the headline of global transformation. So we're looking at some challenges coming from climate change and a striving of many organizations to become more sustainable, So there's a bunch of investment going on in that domain. We also often face situations where customer expectations are going up. I always like to make the example that, well, we all know this ourselves, where we're all consumers. And if we just ask ourselves, what do we expect when we order something online? What kind of visibility we expect to that to be delivered, and from an availability perspective, some stuff we want within the hour, some stuff we want within a day, etc. So we're all used to this as consumers. And we just see that the same is happening now in the B2B world, right? So the same expectations, same levels of expectations are coming up. At the same time, and this is particularly true here in the MEA, I myself am based in Germany. So that whole labor shortages issue, that we don't have the right workers and the right skill sets, and it's hard to find the right personnel. That's a key driver. And if you look at the prediction here, then yeah, it's 92 million people leaving the workforce by 2050. That is a shockingly high number. So that drives a need for more smartness, more intelligence, more automation within our systems. And the good news is the technology transformation gives us the tooling and the toys, if you will, to do this. So we have the rise of the robots, and we got the rise of the AI. And thank you for the slide from earlier on. I think it's not just Gen AI, of course, it's the entire big bubble that you depicted, that is all of which is applicable. And then just the sheer data volume. So we also need new concepts on how can we actually get on top of the massive amounts of data that are being created in the context of supply chain, not just master it, but exploit it and derive value from it. So those are the things we're concerning ourselves with.
So before we get to the next levels of maturity, maybe some facts about Blue Yonder.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, Blue Yonder. I mean, for those who are not so familiar with the company, we're a fairly large company, for at least within the domain of supply chain, with about 1.6, 1.7 billion annual revenue and about 8,000 colleagues. We've started this journey about a year, by now it's probably more like 2 years ago, and with our parent company. So we are a 100% subsidiary of Panasonic, which is a fantastic situation for us to be in, because the Japanese believe in building long-standing sustainable companies that have a duty to serve society. So that's really is the mindset. So they're in for the long run, and they're helping us by basically saying, hey, Blue Yonder, why don't you keep all your earnings? There's nothing you have to give to us, and you can keep it and you can reinvest it. And that gives us about a $1 billion R&D budget that we're spending in 24, 25, and 26. And on top of that, we have another billion that we're spending in acquisitions. In fact, we've kind of already spent it. So you mentioned One Network, you mentioned Flexis, there's Dawdle. So we have created or we've executed a bunch of acquisitions. We're going to keep acquiring, so that's going to keep going as we expand our capabilities and enrich our services offerings. But for us, this is exciting because it's the largest investment in our history, and I think I mean, I don't necessarily have full proof of that, but I think it's a fair assumption that it's probably the largest investment into supply chain management software in the planet, because I don't think let's say the big ERP providers are thinking about supply chain as much as we do.
We will get to that maybe later on. Maybe you can you have this kind of R&D budget and this budget for acquisition. Maybe you can tell us about your North Star. What is your aim?
Yeah, so I like this view because it really simplifies what Blue Yonder is about. So it's these three things that are depicted in that sort of the petals of the flower that you look at. So Blue Yonder is a very, very large, or a better word is broad offering when it comes to our capability offerings. So we have the full stack when it comes to planning, from the detailed scheduling and sequencing up to the network design and the IBP and everything in between on the planning side. But we also support the warehouse, the yard, the transportation, the the returns and the order management. And with the acquisition of the network, the intent is to apply all this not just to the network that a company would own, but to a multi-enterprise network that includes the suppliers of suppliers, etc., in an N-tier fashion, but also downstream, of course, with customers and also with carriers. And then the third petal is indeed AI. So we have a long history. Blue Yonder has started to offer AI-based solutions in supply chain back in 2008. So this is how far we go back. So we kind of have done it before it was cool and everybody did it. But now, of course, with the emergence of Gen AI, there's a ton of fantastic use cases in that domain as well. So all these three petals, they have an underlying foundation, which is our platform. And I can almost feel someone in the audience now rolling their eyes, because platform is such an overused term in the industry. So maybe it's worth qualifying this real quick. So the way I like to think about platform is, you can think of it almost as like a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you find companies, software vendors, which had for the longest time a product offering, and at some point in their marketing started to call it a platform, right? So that's one end of the spectrum, and I would argue there's probably quite a few of those. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you might find the full sort of do-it-yourself type platform, where essentially it's a toolkit where if you as a customer buy into that, you have to pour in to that toolkit all your IP in order to make it work. So that often takes a long time to realize. That is also difficult to maintain in the long run, and is, while it sounds appealing from a flexibility perspective, it is often a challenge from a maintainability perspective. And where Blue Yonder is with our platform, it's somewhere in the middle. And the way I define Blue Yonder platform, it's really just a set of services that are on the one side a technical foundation to everything we offer, but they're also a set of services that add business value. And there's a few things we can discuss, but this platform is essentially the foundation to the three elements: the end-to-end offering on the network, and enriched and infused with AI.
So that's clear, and we're getting back to that when we go through the different levels of maturity. Maybe getting back to the first level, on level 0, and then we get to level 1. So maybe it's good to explain in practical terms why it is necessary to evolve.
No, exactly. So this is, and it ties back to your Ripple slide, right? So if that is the external pressure, I have all this uncertainty out there, then can I really afford internally to have a system landscape that is highly fragmented, where my data is distributed into many, many different pots of data, if you will, and have a certain level of rigidity when it comes to the interchange of information between different systems, typically in a, shall we say, very linear sort of step-by-step process that leads to latency when it comes to decision making. So it's two questions that we really address here. One is latency in decision making, which is of course a problem if you want to be very agile. And the other dimension is the quality of the decision. So if my data is distributed over all these systems, will I consistently have the appropriate basis for decision making, or will I potentially make not so good decision? Ultimately, the result is a certain level of slowness and reactivity. So we feel from a tech perspective, thank you. This example here hopefully makes what I just said is a bit theoretical. So hopefully this is bringing it to life a little bit. So here we have an example where we're essentially saying, hey, I've got my system that in which I manage my promotions, right? And as a company, let's say I'm a CPG type provider, and I'm currently running a very successful promotion, shall we say, in Germany. So from a commercial perspective, I think it's a brilliant idea to just extend that promotion because it's working so well. Now, I make that decision, and then my batch integration picks up this data, and sometime later, maybe the next day or so, my planning system is going to pick up on that, and I'm going to say, oh, look, we're going to change the demand picture based on the extended promotion, and then run a bunch of supply scenarios to make sure that, well, how can we deal with that from a stock availability perspective? Maybe we need to run some transfers, etc. Then let's say we make those decisions and we feel really, really good about those decisions and planning, and somebody needs to start doing the transportation management around that and execute on these planning decisions. So that they then find out, hang on a minute, we can't really do all that transportation that we were planning for because there's now a strike in France, which of course never happens, and therefore we need some alternatives, and need some load rebalancing, etc. And then the poor chaps in the warehouse, they don't know anything about any of that because no one talks to them. And then they're not set up to support the picking efforts for this extended promotion because they haven't planned for it and they don't have the personnel on site in order to do so. So that could be sort of a scenario that happens when the systems, it's multiple systems, the data is distributed into multiple data pots, and the process is strictly linear because it needs to follow the integrations that have been set up.
So basically, you are some sort of on level 1 if you have this, if you have it integrated.
The previous slide would still be sort of level 0. So what companies are trying to do to get a level 1 is to at least tackle the data challenge, but they're trying to do it themselves by creating all these data lakes and data warehouses and lake houses, I heard the other day, and all this terminology floating about, in order to at least get, let's say, to a data integration. But what we're saying is you need more than data integration. You need interoperability across those domains in order to get to this sort of level 2 here, which we then refer to as the interoperable workflows. And there you would have, let's say, more speed, more performance, and particularly less latency, right, in decision making. So if we come back to our little example, the picture could look quite different, right? So maybe promotion management and the demand and supply planning is an integrated process in the first place. That would immediately remove any latency there. If I then had, from a network level perspective, full visibility, I can make sure that my transportation constraints are refreshed frequently and my supply planning doesn't fall into the trap of the of the strike in France. And maybe I can actually give my warehouse management colleagues a bit of a heads up, a few days ahead, and say, guys, this is going to come down the road. So you have a chance to maybe adjust your personnel planning and make sure you have the capacity to support the picking for your extension of the promotion. And then this promotion becomes or this extension of the promotion will become a really nice commercial success for the company, and they would be in a position that they can really exploit the opportunity that has presented itself to them, even in a short-term basis.
Maybe you mentioned a data lake, and you see the different application: promotion management, planning, transportation, warehouse. That could be TMS, WMS. And you see Snowflake. So Snowflake is a provider of a data lake, but you have integrated this Snowflake data lake into your platform.
Correct. So Snowflake is a key partner to Blue Yonder. We have started to collaborate with Snowflake about 5 years ago, and it's now I think the best way to describe them for us is they're a strategic partner, but they're also a key technology provider into our platform. The one thing I would like to avoid, though, is to simply equate Blue Yonder platform with Snowflake, because Blue Yonder platform is much more. But Snowflake is a key tech that enables that sort of data unification across the traditional domains, if you will.
Yeah. And if you move beyond that, so maybe you can explain a bit more what is entailed to use this kind of platform. You mentioned one flow with the promotion, but maybe you can explain more how you should look at it.
Yeah. So we it's always interesting discussion of how to best depict this type of stuff. So we came up with this infinity loop approach where all the processes, and this isn't even a a complete, list in that sense. So from a collaboration perspective and visibility over transportation, logistics, and yard, and put away, and labor, and pricing, and demand and supply, and integrated business planning, all that stuff. The idea is that we can move away from the historic sort of linear approach into all of this, where decisions that are made are being cascaded to the next step in the process. I mean, Gardner says this as well in the IBP domain, that the old thinking of the 4-week SNOP process is no longer what companies should be striving for. In principle, you should be able to make an SNOP or IBP level strategic decision with the same sort of ad hoc framework that you would do a short-term tactical or operational decision, but making sure that the interdependencies are being respected when you do so. So the attempt here with the platform underneath, so that's sort of the dark blue box that we see, is to provide the technical framework to enable such an approach. And the best way, as I said earlier, right, the best way to define Blue Yonder platform is just as a set of services. And we see here some of these light blue headlines. Those are services areas in which platform supports. So for example, in the domain of analytics. Now, I don't think anyone's going to get particularly excited if I say, hey, Blue Yonder platform has a reporting tool. And that's not what we're saying. Yes, of course, it has a very modern sort of reporting tool infrastructure. But what makes it unique, or what makes it super attractive, is if you think about the breadth of what Blue Yonder can offer from a capability perspective. We just spoke about it earlier, right? So all the planning, all the warehousing, transportation, returns, order management, etc., and the network. Imagine what kind of rich and broad data set we can pull together into our data cloud, which is the platform component we're building with Snowflake. Now, having a modern analytics tool on top of such a data set, that's where it becomes interesting, and where there is really a lot of value potential that our customers can exploit. But of course, we're going further than that. We're not just applying, or not just enabling advanced analytics. I mentioned earlier on that we have a long history with data science and applying machine learning in supply chain context. So what we've also put into the platform is a machine learning studio. And the easiest way to think about that, and some of you may ask yourself, well, hang on a minute, but Azure has a studio, Snowflake themselves have facilities for that. So why Blue Yonder? It's the supply chain specific use cases, right, that we propose to host in our studio, because that studio exists on the same platform as all that data that I was just talking about. And what ML Studio is really about is it kind of makes available to our customers. Blue Yonder is now 17 years of experience in productizing machine learning. So with us, it leaves sort of the science project domain, and it becomes something that is deployable in context of a business process, and for business end users who don't have to be data scientists themselves. That's really sort of the value of the reporting and analytics service. Already mentioned the data cloud. That's the other area. So there's a unified data model that spans the entirety of Blue Yonder's offering, which pulls together one of the richest, if not the richest, data sets in supply chain in the world. On the user side, we're investing a lot into user experience. We have a new chief design officer on board. That alone would be an hour worth of webinar to just talk about that. And then lastly, I wanted to call out the extensibility. So this comes back to my spectrum model of platforms from earlier on, between something that is just a product called platform or a complete sort of do-it-yourself environment. With Blue Yonder, you can benefit from out-of-the-box existing capabilities that can be deployed comparably quick, but you're not limited to that, because the offering is extensible through the platform. So we can add in data functions and workflows and data management options and lambdas and whatnot. And all of these extensions are subject to the same lifecycle management that we're submitting our own microservices to. That way they become upgrade safe. So any extension that's being built is upgrade safe and can be upgraded independently in itself, but also doesn't break just because we are upgrading a microservice around it. So that's another key point here.
Maybe, I think the interesting point to mention here, you see a kind of control tower in the middle, but now, Gartner coined command center that's really end-to-end, not so the traditional, procurement control tower or transport control tower. This is really a command center spreading to the real end-to-end, including tier 1, 2, 3 suppliers and downstream to your end market. So that's so the command center is also in the middle here.
Yes, I mean this was one of the key capabilities we did acquire with the One Network acquisition. It was actually already called Command Center in there. I don't know who coined the term, Gartner or One Network. But yeah, so that's a key capability that's part of the offering.
Okay, but that's good to mention. Okay, now we're going to move over to level 3, and then we get more into the future, I would say. So maybe you can explain what is level 3.
So level 3 is when let's quickly repeat. Let's say we have a unified end-to-end supply chain management system that spans execution capabilities and planning capabilities, including order management. And now let's assume we have that ability to speak the same data language through the data cloud. This is where it then becomes really interesting to look into generative AI from an orchestration perspective. So think of it this way. So we started this in 2023 with the idea of we actually just called it the Blue Yonder orchestrator, and it became available in Q4 23. So think of that as your co-pilot type experience, like with a chat experience type approach to just help users make use of the system, make sense of what they're seeing, and maybe this is what we call it, orchestrator, maybe drive a decision forward across a set of stakeholders. But we soon realized supply chain is a bit too complex to try and approach this with like a one-size-fits-all idea of like a co-pilot. And last year we then said, hey, we want to apply the agent concept. So the concept of generative AI agents has already been realized in other enterprise software domains outside of supply chain. And then when we started talking about it in May last year, we did so at our own user conference. And we essentially, once a year we get a large group of supply chain professionals together. It's about 3,500 people that attend our user conference. And so we went on main stage and asked everyone, hey, who wants to be part of the creation of generative AI based agents for supply chain processes? And the resonance was fantastic, and a lot of customers came on board and a part of this journey now. And if you ask yourself, hang on a minute, why do we need so many customers to be part of this? This is simply because we need access to subject matter experts. They're actually working in those roles. So what we're building is role-specific agents. So an agent for warehouse, an agent for transportation, agent for supply planning, one for demand, one for the VP of supply chain, etc. So we have a longer list of roughly 15 such agents that we're creating. And we believe that's working out well, because it's helping unlocking that value that is sort of inherited in this kind of landscape that we're proposing. I have I think a bit more content coming around that.
Yes.
Yeah. So
maybe you can go briefly for time's sake through this next 2 slides, because otherwise we won't get to the agents.
Yeah, super. I'm just going to be super brief on this. This is really just to showcase that long history that we have in the AI domain. What many may not know is that we actually have we're doing actually R&D on algorithm level. So we're not just applying machine learning. We're actually creating algorithms. We're in our third generation of our own proprietary machine learning algorithm. And we've created a few sort of nice innovations also very recently. Let me just call out one of them. So we've created the ability to turn machine learning models into real-time predictors that can be called through APIs. That's of course super interesting in the context of business processes and supply chain, when you don't have to go through like a batch job type creation of a set of forecasts, but can actually ping a predictor through an API and get an instant response with the prediction. So just as a quick highlight from 2023. If we can go to the next slide. Next slide is really just to give the audience a feeling for the scale. So this is where we are at the moment. Just over 20 billion individual machine learning or AI-based predictions per day that we create for our customers. And I think the point below is very critical. I mentioned this earlier on before. We have a lot of sort of experience in the productization of this. This is basically done automatically, right? Marketing has made the next two very, very small, but it is next to zero manual intervention required. So that's really something worth calling out.
All right. Now getting back to the orchestrator, maybe you can explain a bit more, what you want to express on Gen AI and conversations.
It really is the notion of conversational user experience. So that is what Orchestrator is about. It gives you that chat experience. And on the right, we see a few sort of examples. So it can be used to create, or to I shouldn't say create plans, but to be very precise, to run plan generation on behalf of the user with the context given by the user through the prompt. Or it could also then, once plans have been created, hey, help me analyze those scenarios in the output, or understand exceptions. And the last thing is what I mentioned earlier, is that decision support, as you may need to drive a decision across multiple stakeholders.
But the most important thing to me is, and it started out with ChatGPT, but now you can talk to your application, your Blue Yonder application, and you get better insight. You don't have to be trained in that anymore to a large extent. So even salespeople can go in and have a kind of conversation to an application to see, okay, what do they expect that this promotion will do, and with the on the stock availability and on shelf availability, etc.
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, I think everyone will agree that the time where you would have shall we say, a supply planner who is already 10 years in their role and is super experienced and has all that tribal knowledge thoroughly embedded in their head. I mean, the time of this sort of employee is over. It's gone, right? The people that come on board into the companies now, the younger generations, they'll stay in these roles for 2 years, maybe 3, and 3 will already be looked at as, wow, this is a long timer, right? So there's a real need to become productive with the tooling available quickly, and that is, I think, where Gen AI will play a massive role. And it's expected, quite frankly, by the younger
the younger generation. My daughter is 23 and she's going into this business field. She's expecting tools to be productive within days and not months of training, etc. So I think, and
the tool to explain itself to them.
Yeah. Otherwise, these young talents will go to the next company where there is this kind of environment available to be productive in that sense. So now we get to the Blue Yonder engines, and then we get
So this is what I started talking about, right? So in May last year at our user conference, we launched this program, and we're building these agents, and they're conversational, and they're essentially assistants. And in its first guise, or its first stage, as we like to say, is really all about synthesizing data and content generation. So what this really does is, the way to think about it is from an user experience perspective. It means what you're looking at is generated content. So it's not like a dashboard, where your top left corner is always the same kind of pie chart that depicts a particular KPI, and then on the right you have some wiggly lines, and below that you have your list of exceptions and whatnot. It's what you're looking at is generated based on the context of what's going on in your supply chain right now. And in order to do that, we're using LLMs. So we're making use of the chat, sorry, not the chat, the GPT-4o mini LLM. We got our own copy of that, so we wanted to make sure that we are decoupled from the publicly used by, for example, the one that's used by ChatGPT, so that none of our customer data would ever go in there. But we're also not. This is, I think, also important to call out. We're not directly training the LLM, because again, you'd have the same big fat question mark about what's happening with my data that would come from our customers, and rightly so, if I may say. It's actually all in the prompts. So what's being input by a user is being complemented and enriched by the automation, by the agent capability that we're building, and to equip the LLM with all the context to make sense of it, and then to be able to come up with meaningful content, generate meaningful content.
So maybe in the next slide you can show me how it looks like, and then you have a better feeling of what it means. So it's not a dashboard.
Yeah, no, exactly. So this is a nice picture here depicting the idea, right? So on the top you would maybe see some KPIs, but you also see a lot of language there, and we're using what's referred to as smart brevity method, so that I think everyone who's played with ChatGPT knows that it has a tendency to create a lot of words and a lot of text that you may not always want. So we taught it to be succinct and keep it short and keep it brief. And then so the idea is really to say, hey, this is a brief. The first one we've released, this was in October last year, with some of those innovation partners. My last information was that it's about 6 customers of ours that went live with an agent in the context of warehousing.
Okay.
So what they get is essentially, the way you can think about it is, every morning the warehouse manager gets a daily briefing from his agent or her agent. Thank you. Yeah, that talks about for example, here as we see, high priority orders at risk, or a pick rate not being high enough. And the way to think about it is like this. So you would probably need about 5 to 7 analysts, individuals, and they would take half a day, so 4 hours in the morning. So let's say 20 to 28 person hours to pull this kind of brief together, if and when they have access to a great dashboard and great analytics and great capability and great data maturity. But it would still take them this amount of time, and the half of the day would be gone until you'd have these insights on your plate as the warehouse manager. But with the agent, you have that every morning. Every morning it's waiting for you. And that's only stage 1, right?
Yeah. I can imagine, especially logistics service providers, okay, they have all kind of warehouses, especially in the DHL, the DSVs of this world. They have a lot of them. I can imagine that they can have a lot of productivity gains by having this kind of alerts, these daily briefs for individual order pickers, for the leads of a team, etc.
Yeah, for sure. Right. I mean, LSP is a key industry for us. I mean, we have pretty much the who is who of global LSPs are Blue Yonder customers today, and yeah, they are very close to this process.
You mentioned this is only stage 1. If you go beyond that, you have different kind of stages. So maybe you can take us through this. So where can we go to?
So the stage 1 is what we refer to as the intelligence. That's the brief. That's what we've just been discussing. It's synthesizing data, generating content, understanding what's going on, briefing it's human, as we like to say. So the next stage would be, well, part of the intelligence is also the root causing. So not just what is happening, but also why it is happening. And if you can do the root causing, you can also come to recommendations on how to fix it. So that's stage 2, is, hey, let the agent come up with proposals, suggestions on how to fix a certain situation. What an agent also can do, and I think this is an important thing to discuss, and sometimes the lines are getting blurred here a little bit. So Gen AI can act on behalf of a user within direction from the user, but it makes use of the software that is otherwise available to the user as well. So it's not like Gen AI is going to create the forecast, or Gen AI is going to generate the supply plan, or Gen AI is going to launch a new pick wave. Run or design the pick wave. I don't know. That probably doesn't make any sense. What I'm trying to say is, it can make use of the software, so it can do things on behalf of the user. So essentially, that would be stage 3, right? Is you would say, look, if I can have the intelligence, if I can have a recommendation how to fix it, can I also have the agent go execute it for me? And then it almost presents itself as your stage 4. Well, does the agent even have to ask the human for approval, right? Or can it just go through the entire 4 stages or the entire process and say, I've identified the issue, I can recommend the solution, and I go execute it? We call that focused autonomy. So what we foresee is here that there'll be settings and levers for the user, the human user, if you will, to control to what degree they might be comfortable with the autonomy levels.
Yeah. So basically, 5 years ago, robotic process automation was hot. So basically, you don't have to retype from an ERP system or an email, etc., vice versa. Then you automate this. So basically, that's a more advanced way of robotic process automation done by an agent.
Yeah, you could. I mean, we could call it agent automation, maybe agent process automation. I'm just coining a term here. But you could also think of it as imagine the robot was smart, right?
Yep. But 5 years ago you had to program it, and
imagine the robot would understand your business. That's I think a good way of phrasing it.
All right, so this is still within a company, so in level 3. Now we get to the more advanced in supply chain field, the holy grail, I would say. So this is level 4.
So as we talked about before, right? So in August 1st last year, we completed the acquisition of One Network. So that really is something that changes the DNA of our company. It's a very, very strategic acquisition for us, because everything we've just discussed is, of course, by its nature, applicable to any organization. But with the addition of One Network, we think about it in a way that this is applicable to a multi-enterprise supply chain, and not just the supply chain of a single company. And that's really the value that One Network adds to the Blue Yonder offering. I mean, it has all existing, fantastic existing capabilities, like we just discussed, the command center and the collaboration upstream and the visibility and all that good stuff. But the strategic motion really is to say, hey, the breadth of what Blue Yonder is able to offer becomes available on a network. So this is what we're trying to depict here with this slide. It's always hard to put thoughts like this in slides, but as we're coming together, we have this planning and execution footprint, and we're going to be applying it on the network with the help of agents, with the help of all that solver intelligence we talked about at the very beginning, and also the predictive AI, and with a single data cloud that is able to actually meet the scalability requirements of such an endeavor as well. This is what Snowflake adds to the cake.
Yeah. So One Network, it started out with EDI integration of getting your orders via EDI, etc. That's a starting point, and then it levels out in a larger scale. But that's an entry point to get the connection of your tier 1 and tier 2 supplier and so forth and so on. But now you expanding this whole platform thinking with all the other stuff you mentioned earlier.
Correct. Yeah, and what's sort of unique about One Network, and also the reason this is, by the way, is interesting, right? Many of the companies we acquired, they actually were not on the market to be acquired. So this is how strategic this was. This was us approaching them and saying, hey, this is what we plan to do. We need you to be part of this, and they are seeing the value of the endeavor and the not a small enterprise that we're undertaking here, and they agreed with this. So essentially, what was great about One Network and why we wanted One Network to be our part of our family here is the way they approached this network thinking was different to the other players in the market, right? So their thinking is a node in the network can be both hub or just node at the same time. So if you're an organization, you can be a node in somebody else's network, but at the same time, you can be a hub driving your own network. And that is the ability we were looking for.
Maybe this final slide will explain, and then we get to the Q&A, because I get some questions coming in. Maybe you can explain it here. On the left hand side, you see the old approach. Some companies are still in that area, level 1 or 2.
Yeah. So I think what this really nicely depicts is you see how many arrows there are that go point to point in the picture of the past, right? So you have this between buyers and suppliers, but also other players, your LSPs, your carriers, and so on. So everything's point to point, which leads to decisions that are potentially quite siloed, that are not orchestrated, that are not. This is the decision orchestration we've been discussing, that may cause problems because a stakeholder wasn't included that should have been included, and creates all these sort of blind spots, with all the impacts that we discussed, right? From ultimately, what every company wants is serve their customers in a way that it's profitable, and that's being endangered by this approach. And the proposition from Blue Yonder is a networked supply chain, where you have the network as the central part, where everybody's on, and everything is at the end of the day based on a single version of truth, which is what the Snowflake based capability enables for us, but also with controlled permissions, real-time visibility, and essentially creating an ecosystem that enables a both planning and execution framework across that multi-enterprise supply chain.
So getting back to one of my first slides about the ripple effects, and there were bullwhips in the center. So you see it on the lower left side, bullwhips in the left approach. When you share data in a platform, and that's also what Professor Hao Lee mentioned and lectured, I think 15 years ago already. The only way to prevent the bullwhip is share data instantly, and you need a platform for that reason. So basically, that's what you need.
Yeah, you need a platform, and you need a network.
Yeah, absolutely. So some questions. So first question, maybe you can answer it quickly. What's the difference between stage 3 and stage 4? To wrap up,
it's really the inclusion of the AIs.
Yeah, and stage 4 is not stage 3 is using the platform internally, and stage 4 you extend it with your suppliers and your customers.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 3 and 4. My bad. Yes. No, you're right. The difference is to do everything we've been talking about on an extended multi-enterprise network rather than just on your own network. That's the main difference. Sorry, my bad.
Some more questions, more than probably we can answer. So is this platform suitable for small enterprises?
So, I mean, we tend to serve the larger end of the SMB spectrum and the large global players. So we typically start operating with customers that are in the 1 billion and above annual revenue.
But I can expect,
depends on what is small, right?
yeah, but I expect moving forward that mid-sized company will be entering the platform, and maybe will be integrated into the platform as such. So I think that will evolve over time.
So from a network perspective, yes, I agree.
So maybe you will be a user as a tier 1 or tier 2 supplier into a network of a larger multinational. That could be the case.
Yes.
Final question, and then or maybe there are too many questions. So I want to stick within the hour, and we are already running out of time. So basically, what we see. So there will be an extra 30 minutes if you want to sit down with Gabriel and me in the virtual lounge. That's quite easy. We'll be sitting at table 1. You go in there and click on it, and then you will be there, and you will meet us. So there will be more information about all this. To the left, you can go to the IT Supermap. You can download it, and you can drill it, and you can go to Blue Yonder and see the different applications and customers. We also created together with Blue Yonder a roadmap for supply chain digitalization, the different levels, the 5 level we mentioned earlier. So it's also downloadable on one page. And there's a cool environment at the website of Blue Yonder, and you will have a direct conversation with all the questions you mentioned. They will be answered in a chatbot kind of way. So that's available over there. With this, I would like to thank the audience for watching and the questions. If you have more questions, feel free to join us in the lounge. And Gabriel Werner, thank you for explaining AI and agents. And it's very fruitful to have this kind of conversation with you. Thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome. All right. As of now, I want to thank you for all of you for listening in live or in the recording. And we will be back probably another time next week. We'll have another webinar. And for now, I want to thank you and say bye-bye. And maybe I see you later in the lounge. Thank you and bye-bye.